One of the things I like to quote is the teacher here, Mr. Al G. He's been teaching his students about sustainability, and he always has said that his light bulb moment was when he realized all I need to do is work at my community, at the community level, on doing what we can. And if we just do everything we can to make sure our community is doing its share, we can just put our trust that other people like us are doing the same thing in other communities. And that's how we'll solve this global problem, but one community at a time, and each to their own community.
So density is probably the most important part of climate action that we can do in the city of Vernon, is to slowly densify, think about 3 and 4 floor buildings on sites, and that will double or triple our density over time. But with it, we have to enhance our parks and natural spaces. And we can do that in real positive ways. We know it's going to be hotter, so we'll have to do more trees. And we know we have to focus a bit more on what one would call a linear park. So we're creating these off-road multi-use paths, the one from Polson Park to the Village Green, using 30th and 29th Streets. But we've set that up with shade trees, so it will be closed canopy over them.
Hi, I'm Sue.
And I'm Heath.
Together, we've created the Backyards to Boardrooms video podcast series.
Why? Because our planet has a problem. It is not very sustainable.
Luckily, we've come up with a solution to help. On Backyards to Boardrooms, we use the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals to highlight the work being done in our communities.
We chat with local leaders about causes such as sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, and climate action. Backyards to Boardrooms,
where local action creates global impact. Heath, it's our final episode.
I know, number 8, Sue.
Can you believe we're here already?
Yeah, we're here.
I say already, but this has been in production for this entire year. So
yeah, it didn't just start last week, that's for sure.
No, it's been a long time coming.
Yeah.
But episode 8, I think I was expecting it to just really focus on climate action. We're talking about sustainable cities and communities and climate action, SDG 11 and 13 in this episode. And I was really expecting that to be the focus of the conversation.
Yeah.
But what I found when we interviewed our 2 guests in this episode is that everything they talked about covered all of our other episodes. All of the other topics that we talked about really culminated in this episode.
Yeah, all the subject matter seemed to tie back to, what we're doing at a local level, and how it actually contributes to the greater initiative, which is, how do we resolve this issue with our planet that is affecting our climate? And we're all seeing the effects. It's not really about, is there climate change? It's actually happening, and we're seeing it. We're experiencing it. Some people are being tremendously affected by it.
There are huge impacts,
mm-hmm.
not just here in the Okanagan Valley, but around the world.
Around the world, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So our 2 guests, in kind of opposite or different from our previous episode, where we had all private businesses, and this one we have a nonprofit and we have government entity. Who are our guests coming up in this episode, Heath?
Today we have Mary Stockdale. She's from the Climate Action Now organization of the North Okanagan. And along with her is Mayor Victor Cumming, Mayor of Vernon.
Yeah, and I was so excited when he accepted our invitation to come on the show, not only because he's the mayor of the city of Vernon, and so he can speak to a lot of the initiatives and policies within our city, but also because he's an economic consultant. So he has a deep understanding of the financial perspective and of the overall sustainability perspective that we're looking for.
And both these people have very they're very both personally passionate about the environment and about all these initiatives. So it's really amazing to see their excitement about what they're doing.
Yeah. So instead of us talking about it right now, let's get to their interviews, and then we have a special surprise. We're going to finish off this episode with something special. Should we?
Wow. I hope it's as good as it sounds.
I'm selling it, Heath. I'm trying to get everyone who's listening to this episode to just stick around. Stick around until after the conversation with Mayor Cumming. Heath and I are going to have a chat about this whole series. We're going to recap. We're going to share some insights, and we're going to talk about what's next.
A little trip down memory lane.
Oh. On that note, we're really excited to have Mary Stockdale with us today. Mary is a pillar in our community and has done so much work in and around climate action, sustainability, and I don't know, you name the topic, and Mary probably knows someone or something about it. So without diving too deep into it myself, Mary, will you give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself and why you're so passionate, why you do what you do?
Sure. I've lived in Vernon for about 18 years. I moved here with my husband and children in 2006. We were really happy to move here because my parents have a farm up in Enderby, just below the Enderby Cliffs, a little sheep farm up there. And so it was nice to be near them. And I think we're just at the stage in our life where we're like, okay, we're moving there and then we're not going to move anymore. We're just going to put in our roots and stay. This is our community. We're just going to really dig in and be part of the community, which we've done ever since. And I think from there, I decided to be part of the sort of, made a commitment to be part of sort of promoting sustainability. In particular, I was interested in taking action on climate change and food systems, food security, because of my parents being farmers. And so I teach at the university, UBCO, and I teach about those topics, sustainability and the environment and food systems.
Mary, it's cool to be in this environment with you because I've known you a little bit because you and my wife, Carolyn, go way back to tree planting days, like a few decades ago. And I've known you from that perspective, and it's been really great to get to know a little bit more about you through what you're doing with climate action now and sustainability. So, yeah, I'm excited to hear more about what you got going on.
Me too. Looking forward to this.
So tell us about climate action now that Heath has brought it up. In my little basic research, I know that it's about advocacy, but I think it's got so much more depth than that.
Yeah, the founding story is that I guess after starting, it started to be in the news more, climate change as a threat, and I think there was Al Gore's movie and so on. And I was a mom with kids, young children at the time, and I started thinking this is a really important issue, and I kind of started to think this is what I'm going to be devoting a lot of my energy to, is just doing what I can on climate change. And so around that time, I actually did a big bike ride across BC with a bunch of other mums and their kids and their, husbands. And we went all the way to Victoria asking for action on climate change. But then when I was back in Vernon, people were saying to me, you really should meet Bill Darnell. And Bill Darnell is this amazing person. He's kind of my mentor. He was one of the founders of Greenpeace. And had been a teacher in the area around Vernon for quite a few years. So we met up and we kind of founded Climate Action Now because we both agreed this is what we want to really devote our time to. And for quite a long time, we just were growing in membership. This has never been a society or a charity. It's just kind of a loose affiliation of people who want to take action locally on climate change. But we have over 400 members. We're not party political, but we do a lot of advocacy and we get involved in the elections looking for who are the climate champions. But over time, Bill and I realized, that we really wanted to focus on what's happening at the local government level. So we did a presentation to the City of Vernon in 2016, where we asked, there's a lot that can be done at the local municipal level. Please, can you set strong targets and develop a good climate action plan? And we suggested also, could you have some sort of committee of volunteers from the community to help you develop that plan and implement that plan? And so that's really how it started. The city responded really well. And so we ended up with this process of developing a climate action plan that was guided by this wonderful climate action advisory committee that was connected to the City of Vernon, that kind of oversaw the process. And Bill and I took turns being co-chairs of that committee, together with Brian Guy, who's now a councillor.
What a nice... I don't know what the
Segue?
word is I'm looking for.
Segue?
We're starting this episode on climate action with you,
Mm-hmm.
Mary, and we're going to be talking to the city. So coming up later in this episode,
Yes.
we'll be talking
Yeah.
with the mayor about the
Yay.
Climate Action Advisory Committee, because it does still exist, and they are still, a huge list of action steps that can be taken that our
Yeah.
community can be involved in.
Yeah.
So tell us more about. The big overarching problem is climate change.
Yeah.
Right? But if we drill that down, how does it impact our community?
So climate change, I feel it's the existential crisis of our times. Like, we have to grapple with it. It's
Existential
happening.
is a great word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It affects our existence. It affects a lot of things about our existence, that are very important. And, it's no longer just a theory. We all see it. It's now happening.
Mhm.
And but we've experienced it directly through the fires, through the droughts, through the floods, that happen locally, as well as you hear on the news about it happening other places. And so I did want to show a scarf that Bill Darnell's wife Phyllis, she's a knitter, and so she knit me this 2021 Vernon climate scarf. So it's basically that each row is a day in the year 2021 in Vernon, the Vernon daily average temperature. And so it's kind of color coded. So if you start off with this purple and blue, these are all these cold colors in January, February,
So
March,
cool.
April.
I love that.
And then you get into spring, this nice green spring, and then May, and then June. And June, here it is. We have a very dark red, because in 2021, that's when, just as it hit early July, that's when we had the heat dome,
Yeah.
where temperatures were in the high, like mid 40s. And then, as you go on through the summer, that if you remember that as a Vernonite, it's like when we were all put on evacuation alert, or even evacuation orders if we were on the west side.
Oh, it was like Armageddon here. It was
This
crazy.
glow on the horizon, and the cinders coming over. Like we all just got post-traumatic stress from that.
It was,
It's a memory.
Yeah.
It was
Stories for
Terrifying.
all of us. We all have stories about it. I wrote an article that was all about, trying to get my family together and worrying about my son, who was a firefighter. And, we all have those kinds of stories. And if you remember going through into the cooler fall, there was a lot of rain in November, and it was that atmospheric river.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I remember my son was trying to drive back to the coast, and he got stuck in Hope. You remember that?
Yep.
All those people
Oh,
getting
the
stuck in
flooding.
Hope.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
that's-
crazy. That year, I think, brought the whole climate issue to reality for locals, and it's like,
Yeah.
you do get quite isolated and siloed and living sort of in these little worlds, and it's not really affecting you, but now that it is affecting everybody in
Yeah.
a very impactful way. Like, the fires and the floods and the heat, the domes, like you just can't ignore it anymore. It is something
Yeah.
but it is overwhelming to try and figure out, what can I do, as an individual,
Mhm.
when we're looking
Yeah.
at some of these global impacts. What can I do here in Vernon in my backyard that is going to make
Yeah.
some sort of impact, right?
Yeah, and so, I think the big problem is that climate change, but the problem within that is, it's not that we don't have the solutions. We do have the solutions, and in terms of policies, in terms of technology, in terms of roadmaps for us to follow. The real problem, I think, is, can enough of us on this planet, enough of us humans, get on board fast enough that we can kind of minimize the impacts. Like there are going to be some impacts already in place that are going to come at us, but sooner we can get on board and acting to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, the better off we'll be in terms of the futures that we can look forward to. So really the problem within the problem is how can we motivate ourselves to take action on climate change and to unite around that and not be divided by it. It's an issue that should just unite us. We all face the problem. The solutions are there, and it's not a left-right issue. It's just a human issue that we need to face. So it's very intimidating to think about climate change as this global problem, and it's just too large. And what can one person do? And it's actually also really hard when we're told it's kind of just up to us as individuals. It's like we get a lot of personal guilt, and no one can be perfect and do everything. We're all kind of stuck in a system where we can't do everything we'd like to do, not always able to afford it. And it's kind of very isolating and guilt-inducing. So I have a lot of ambition, and I have a lot of belief in Vernon as a community that can really not only do its part, but kind of be a real inspiration for other communities.
Vernon is the perfect size, right?
It is.
We were talking about that earlier.
Yeah,
and we've been talking about it through all of our episodes and all of our interviews here on Backyards to Boardrooms, how collaboration is a really key in Vernon, how our organizations and people know how to collaborate here.
I think there's a lot of potential. Like we are the right size to have a community feeling and to feel like, we all sort of know someone who knows someone. Like, there's this kind of feeling that no one's too far away. Like we're all within this little network or web. But I think COVID and things like, recent experiences, that kind of some of the social media stuff, has really served to divide us in ways that we weren't so much before. I really hope we can rebuild it. I think that's part of addressing climate change, is actually because a big part of it is about resilience to address the climate impacts that are facing us, like wildfires in the summer and droughts and perhaps economic shocks coming from, food impacts. And, there's a lot that we, could be coming. And the best way to face it, and this is kind of almost like something research is showing, is the best way to face it is as by pulling together and working together at the community level and supporting each other to kind of withstand those shocks and strains. And I love this quote that I heard about this hurricane hitting the East Coast in New England, where someone said, it's not about how many candles I have in my basement that's going to help me through this hurricane season. It's about how well I know my neighbors. And I think that's the kind of philosophy we need.
Here we are on our final episode of this series, this TELUS STORYHIVE series. Episode 8 is all about climate action. And we are so honored and grateful to have Mayor Cumming with us today, the Mayor of the City of Vernon, joining us to talk about what the city is doing for what words am I looking for? I've already messed up.
Climate action.
Yeah. How the city is working towards creating a better future with a better climate. Welcome, Mr. Mayor.
Welcome. So great to have you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for being here. So let's hear about you and what got you where you are today and your passion for sustainability and the environment.
Yeah, long-term Vernon resident. That's one of the things important. Came here with a family of 4 kids in 92, so that gives me more than 30 years here. High school, etc., all in Penticton. I was what they call a Narramation. That's someone from Narramata. And so a long connection to the Okanagan and Okanagan activities. We came here because of the great outdoors, and all our kids and my wife and I are all keen on doing outdoor activities in all 4 seasons. So it was really attractive. I needed an airport. I'm a regional economist. I work with communities on redeveloping their economy, often after a crisis, often when they're struggling. So these are struggling communities, mostly Western Canada, some NWT and Yukon. And before that, I was doing stuff long-term in Southern Africa, Botswana, stuff in Vanuatu in the South Pacific. So I had most of 8 years on the international world before I came back to BC, to Canada, and really focused on Canadian communities. So ran a small consulting firm out of Vernon. Initially, we had 6 people here and 6 in Vancouver, and I was running the operation from here because of Vernon. Just wanted to be here, and it was pre-electronic, so you physically had to go to the communities and be there on the ground. And over time, of course, the electronic began to take over, and we were able to do more and more, initially by video, a hookup, which was some of the early stuff that we did, and then sometimes even over the telephone. So when we moved from there to being electronic, we were also in communities regularly. So basically every week I was somewhere in Western Canada working with a community that was trying to move along on their regional economics, but also their quality of community. So physical environment and social environment and the linking of them together. And in the, after doing that for quite a while, I had friends, I use the word loosely, who suggested that I might become the mayor of Vernon. And I put my hand up and I didn't get elected, so that was great. I went back to work on Monday, and I thought that little brain cramp was over. But they were relentless, and some of them were on council, and they encouraged me in 2018 to run for mayor again. And half the community thought that was a good idea, at least those who showed up and voted. And after 4 years of doing that, I felt quite done, which is great. And those close to me indicated that I wasn't done. So I put my hand up again. And so I'm 2 years into my next 4-year term as Mayor of Vernon. Basically, they were wanting me to bring some of the ideas and the things that I was doing in other places and focus them here in Vernon and North Okanagan, and some of it Okanagan-wide.
And I think that rehabilitation of communities is exactly what we're talking about here, even as far as sustainability, right? It's important to be sustainable economically as it is environmentally. And so let's talk about the City of Vernon. What are we doing in the City of Vernon? What is the City of Vernon doing to make this community better?
I think that there's 2 things that are really important for people to understand. One is that the corporation does things itself. And those things, I'll talk about some of the things that the actual corporation is doing. And then there's those things that the community is doing on a much wider basis. And both of those are absolutely critical to us, making Vernon actually a better place. Some of them are adaptive in the sense that we know that the climate is changing and changing rapidly. So we've got to do some things about our bridges because they cause the water to back up when we have a heavy flow. And we've had that in the last 5 years for those who are here. And that creates flooding. And so we put significant effort into beginning to naturalize Vernon Creek. And we put the new bridge in, just open at 43rd Avenue. And people will notice who live on that side, they finally got the bridge back. These are things that will prevent flooding. We'll be doing the same on a number of other places. So that's the adaptation side of this. But you can do things to reduce the impact and reduce the greenhouse gases that you're producing. And the City of Vernon has gotten quite involved in those things. There's really 3 components if you're really going to affect greenhouse gases. You're going to deal with the organics much more effectively. You're going to reduce the greenhouse gases, what you produce when you're heating and cooling buildings. And you're going to reduce greenhouse gas use in the transportation sector. And those 3 kind of go 7%, the organics, a little bit more than 30% on buildings, and a huge part on transportation. Over 60% of our greenhouse gases here are related to transportation. So the city has gone after all 3 of those. The community's been heavily involved on the organics. Very exciting process of having organics pick up every week. So just a tremendous reduction in our long-term greenhouse gas production by having people use the organic bucket. So that's something the corporation's done. It also reduces our costs because we dump less into the dump. So in the end, it has a positive impact on the environment, and it reduces slightly what people pay in taxes. So those are one of those things where it's a positive. And the organics gets used for soil enhancement on farms. So that's what you call a win-win-win. And we're really pleased that community members have really attached themselves to it. And now much less is going to the dump in terms of garbage. And that's really critical too, because having a garbage dump is really expensive. And when you fill it up and you got to find another one, it's really, really expensive. So We want to absolute minimize what gets taken to the dump. And organics, which, decompose and cause significant problems to our GHGs, greenhouse gas emissions, are much better just composted and added to soil. And if you're doing it in a farming environment, it replaces chemical fertilizers. So that's a real positive thing that we're doing. On the transportation side, we did talk about that being the biggest issue. City Council passed a resolution that we would not purchase any new small passenger or small trucks, pickup trucks, that weren't hybrid or electric. And we have 5 or 6 years in on that program. So the numbers are pretty impressive when you think about it. It's because vehicles, when you're running a fairly large organization like the City of Vernon, they come up for renewal. They age out. It's
right.
Nothing new. We're not going and buying things just because it would be nice to have. They age out, and so we just replace them with things that use a lot less carbon-based fuels. So we've got 8 vehicles like that right now. We've also done some cute things. We bought electric bikes for staff. The other thing we've done just recently, which I'm sure you both are aware of, we took 2 of our Zambonis and got them refitted with electricity. And
That's
we needed
awesome.
we needed a third one.
Yes.
So the third one's it's fully electric right from start. So there's an example with the Zambonis. Burning propane inside a building where people are sitting is not the best thing in the long run, and we all know that. It's an air quality question, and therefore, when we can go to electric, it improves the air quality.
What a great way to support our sports community, right?
Absolutely. So you end up with a good Zamboni. You end up something that isn't burning propane. Yeah. And really, the other thing is, with these electric vehicles, their costs are actually less. We've now crossed that line where purchase plus operations of electric vehicles are actually less than what you would get in an internal combustion engine. And so that's another thing the city's doing. So that with buildings, a bit more complicated, but it's a huge, over 30% of our greenhouse gases is from how we heat and cool buildings. So our desire is to initially reduce the natural gas we're using, which is basically what we're using at this point. Eventually moving to electric systems, heat pumps and things like that. So we've done it pretty effectively. We replaced the boiler in the city hall, which also feeds the RCMP and the museum and another one of our buildings, plus the fire hall. And the boiler was so big, we had to cut it in pieces to get it out the door. It was in there when the building was built in 1966. So
they built the building around the boiler.
They built the building around the boiler, basically, and it meant you had to run the whole boiler to do anything, even on a mixed day. So we've replaced it with a very high-end natural gas system that only cuts on the number of little tube boilers that require to meet the needs of the day. So we haven't switched out of using natural gas, but we've reduced it significantly there. We've done the same thing on old technology that was at the swimming pool. Heating water is very energy intensive. So we've switched some of those out as well. So we're working at this kind of step by step. When things become time to be renewed, then we find a much more energy efficient way of doing it. Any new buildings, we're requiring them to be what they call net zero ready. So basically, they're almost completely electrical systems, some natural gas. The new pool that we're building, the new active living center, has some large pools. We will be going with a combination system and reducing significantly the greenhouse gas production from heating the new swimming pools. So those are what the corporation is currently doing. And we're going to start feeling the effects. I mean, when you have 8 vehicles, you start to see that your fuel consumption has actually gone down.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I honestly, both Mary and Mayor Cumming are so knowledgeable.
Yeah.
And their passion is really evident.
Yeah.
So really excited to hear about how the community can participate.
Yeah. If you're not excited after listening to those two, I don't know what's going to get you going, but that's there's more to learn and ways to get involved.
Yes.
Yeah.
So up next, community action.
Here we go.
Our goal on Backyards to Boardrooms is to inspire community action. So what can people do to participate?
Definitely. Well, so there's groups like mine, Climate Action Now, which is kind of, a lot of what it does is kind of act as a listserv, just kind of telling people what's going on, particularly on local climate action. So it's quite focused. But there's other groups like SENS, the Sustainable Environment Network Society, and there's the City of Vernon itself. It has this amazing climate action plan, and it's a prize-winning climate action plan, what ended up being developed through a lot of public engagement, talking to the community about what they wanted in the plan and getting their feedback and incorporating it into the plan. And it's written in a way that's very accessible to community members. And now the city's is got this great planners in their long-range planners in their staff that are implementing the plan, and they need the community to be involved, because although some of the climate actions are like internal, like let's have an electric fleet in the city vehicles and that kind of thing, but a lot of it's about changing the community behavior. Like the city can only do so much, and then it's up to the community members to be on board. So changing the way we treat waste, changing the way we build our buildings or retrofit our buildings, and transportation. Those are the big ones at the local level. So a lot of it's about behavior change and sort of attitude change amongst the community members. So keep an eye on what the city has got on their website, because there's actually unrolling a lot of interesting projects. Keep an eye on what the nonprofit sector are doing as well. There's this Neighbors United deep canvassing. There's CARE, the school program. A lot of kids are doing climate action projects through that CARE, Climate Action Ripple Effect program at School District 22. There's a lot going on in our community, actually, and so there's a lot of different ways to be involved.
Yeah.
But underneath it all, I still think to prepare ourselves for climate change, one of the things we need to do is just work on building relationships of trust in our community with one another, especially with people who think differently from you, and work on building community cohesion, because a community that still likes each other, still trusts each other, even if we have different opinions about things, is a community that's going to get through this a lot better. Yeah,
you're right. Yeah.
And I'm smiling really big right now because I think you actually went through each of our episodes of Backyards to Boardrooms on what the things that we've been talking about and the guests that we've had on. All of these things lead into climate action. So thank you for summarizing that for us.
That's great.
You're just checking off the list. Hey, Sue. Oh,
yeah.
She hit that. She got that.
Yep,
Perfect.
Yep.
Unprompted and unscripted.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
amazing.
from poverty to social inclusion, community resources, waste management, managing natural resources, building technology, sustainable practices, education, all of those things. Yeah, it's all, and we've only scratched the surface. So
right.
Yeah, it's a profound topic, and like when we talk about change, like I think people fear change, and I think in some ways, I think we're not necessarily changing, but going back to being more connected to community members in person out there in the community, and more connected to our natural world. So some of it's like taking what was good from the older days, and also, there's also kind of a moving forward. So I just want to say that part of what we did when we developed the Climate Action Plan as the Climate Action Advisory Committee in the City of Vernon is Bill and I, we did some training in climate ambassadors. So it was people, over 30 people from very diverse backgrounds, going out to their peers and talking to them about the Climate Action Plan and saying, this is what the city is thinking of doing. What are your thoughts? And then taking those thoughts back to the city. So it wasn't just telling their peers things, it was listening and reflecting back.
Right.
And and so what I think part of getting people on board is getting beyond the usual group of environmentalists and speaking just the language of environmentalists. This is not an environmental issue or an environmentalist issue. It's an everyone issue. And that was really what our training was with the ambassadors, is just that peer messaging, peer-to-peer messaging. And I think that's part of what we need to do to get the message out and get enough people on board.
Thank you so much for joining us, Mary.
Yeah, thank you, Mary.
Your wisdom and experience are valuable, and we really appreciate being able to share it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's great advice to people, the individuals, to do things as they happen, like to out with the old, in with the new, one step at a time. Looking at completely retrofitting your house or replacing all your vehicles is overwhelming and too much for the individual. So I think it's great. It's a great advice around, taking one step at a time and doing whatever you can in the moment.
Yeah, and I would say on the individual basis, if you look now, jump on I can use trade names. You jump on Auto Trader, and you will see that secondhand electric vehicles are emerging in fairly large numbers.
Oh,
so you can get a half price secondhand electric vehicle. Look at what it can do and might be helpful for you. We went with a secondhand plug-in hybrid, and it reduced our gasoline use by 2/3. Seems kind of crazy, but it was pretty simple. And we got it half price because it was a few years old and on the market. And so it's surprising if you just open yourself to that possibility when you're replacing our vehicles. We run up to 350 or 360,000 K, and then they're basically clapped out. And so it was then that we went looking for what are the alternatives. And we have been pleasantly surprised with the significant reduction in gasoline, and electricity is cheaper to drive around on than gasoline. So, and that's what I encourage others. Just look at these moments. And we know that more than 60% of our household greenhouse gas production is from transportation. So we said, okay, when it comes time, how do we begin to do this sort of one vehicle at a time? When you were talking about, what do we do at the household level? One of those things you can do is when your furnace begins to age out, do look at an air source heat pump.
Can I ask you a question? But you were talking about the net zero ready building requirements. Is that specifically for city buildings, like buildings that belong to the city, or is that requirements for anybody building commercial buildings in Vernon?
No, that's just for the city.
Okay.
What that does is it sets us up really effectively for producing our own electricity on site. So that's the adding of solar panels. For those who have been around this industry, you'll notice that the cost of a solar panel has been falling very dramatically over the last 5 years, and the efficiency of each panel has been creeping up as well.
Right.
So what we're doing is setting ourselves up for a future time when we would invest in solar panels for, let's call it the active living center or one of our arenas or our administration buildings.
Have we started implementing requirements for new buildings in Vernon as far as what they have to provide as far as environmental infrastructure for them, or no, not yet? We're not at that stage yet.
The answer is yes. There is a BC-wide building code that requires the buildings to become far more efficient. And that just means that they need less energy. The next step is going to be a carbon level that they're allowed to use, but that will come in time.
Right.
Right now, we've got this what's called a step code, and it means that the building has to meet a higher and higher level of function as a building, and therefore need less energy as an envelope.
I see.
But it doesn't say whether it's natural gas or electric. But over time, within the next decade or so, you'll see the requirement that the systems will have to be reduced carbon, and that really goes mostly to electricity.
It's been really nice that you've touched on the building technology, rehabilitating habitats and ecosystems within our community, also the transportation. We're coming out of a few really awesome conversations in this series that have gone deeper in those topics. Can we attach some of what we're talking about here to the climate action plan? The City of Vernon has this amazing climate action plan that could be really useful for our community to read and put things into action.
Absolutely. It's been award-winning because it really embraces this idea that as you start to deal with climate issues, you actually make the community better. And it sets the go-ahead for how you do that successfully.
Is that the role of the Climate Action Advisory Committee, is to kind of come to the table with some of these ideas and present them, and then they're discussed? Like, maybe give us a little background on how the CAAC actually works.
A task force was created by the council more than 6 years ago, and that said, okay, what's the current situation in terms of our climate situation, and what are the very specific things we can do? And that's why it's called an action plan. And out of that task force, the council today realized this needs to be a permanent committee, because this committee is going to be working on implementation of all of these recommendations and suggestions. So it's a citizens committee. It meets 8-9 times a year. It looks at these implementation objectives and then comes up with Vernon-centric actual things that you can do on Tuesday morning. And then it finds a way of funding them or resourcing them in some ways or supporting things that other people are doing that actually is going to make a difference. So this Citizens Committee has been very strong, and people on it have been very capable, including some students. It just really gives it a Tuesday morning, what are we doing kind of feel. And that puts pressure on our systems, which is really good. It's good to have this kind of clarity. Particularly from our youth and some of us older folks who are impatient. It's helpful to have a place where these things happen. So you'll get support for the things like naturalizing Polson Park, which was a requirement from Department of Fisheries and Oceans, because we needed to deal more effectively with fish and stream and water quality, et cetera, et cetera. So this will help our contribution to our climate, and it will improve Polson Park quite significantly, and it'll definitely improve access to spawning grounds for both kokanee and the sockeye that we expect starting to come in 2027.
That Polson Park is such an example of what's the change that's needed to move forward in the future, because I mean, of course everybody's probably looking at Polson Park like, it's so beautiful, why are you destroying it? Like, look what you've done, like, but that's the kind of shift that we have to make. We cannot keep doing the same things in the same ways we used to do, because that's how it got us in the trouble in the first place. Well, this has been excellent. Thank you for doing what you do, and thank you for being here with us today and chatting with us about climate action and taking part in our final episode of this season. Okay. All right. So hopefully you've come back and you have something in mind that's going to trigger you to get out there and take action. Something's out there. You'll find something. And, for me, this topic, sometimes it's serious. There's a lot of serious issues that we're talking about here. It's not always something that people are comfortable talking about. And I think, I'll admit I'm one of those people. It's like, you think about something super serious, like some of these issues that we've been going over for the last 8 episodes. It wasn't something that I talked about a lot of. I mean, if you're like me, you know about them, but it's not something that you have a conversation with on a daily basis. But what's happening is we can't avoid these conversations, and having this opportunity to bring these people, a lot of these guests, these organizations into this podcast and allowing some free-flowing conversation and sharing some ideas. I hope that you're as inspired as I am around what to do next in your own backyard and in your own community.
I would call this a journey that we've been on together, Heath, and it was almost a year ago.
Yes.
It was almost a year ago that we took that walk in Polson Park in minus 20-degree weather, and we came up with this crazy idea to pitch to TELUS STORYHIVE for this grant. And I remember when I first mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals, you kind of looked at me like, what? Like I had 3 heads or something?
Well, actually, I think you said, we're going to work with the SDGs, the United Nations. And I'm going,
yeah.
SDG? What does that
What does that
for?
mean?
And I don't think I'm alone anymore. I think I'm really glad that I know what those mean, but there are a lot of people that don't know what that mean. I mean, I don't even think I understood that there were global initiatives or goals set out by the United Nations. And so I've been completely exposed to a whole new world that I really didn't know a lot of. I mean, you've had a lot of experience more on the international stage.
Some experience, some exposure. But
that's what it takes, though, right?
It takes that to really kind of tip the start of the information, but we really got to dive in. So we have some questions. We have 5 questions that we've designed that can it's going to help us recap for you, our listener, to help you understand kind of what the journey has meant to us and what we hope it has delivered for you.
All right, so I'll start. Okay, Sue, here's your question.
Okay, I'm ready.
What was the most surprising or impactful insight we gained from our guests?
Yeah, so I have to go back to episode 1. There were so many moments of realization throughout the series, moments of inspiration, but the most important and impactful aha moment I think I had was when we were chatting with Julia from CMHA Vernon, the Mental Health Association. And I don't even know what it was she said, but at one point I had this moment of clarity that I realized that mental health and poverty, 2 seemingly separate issues, create a 2-way street. So your level of poverty is going to impact your mental health, but then your status of your mental health, if it's not in good shape, that potentially has an impact on whether or not you're going to be living in poverty.
Yeah, they're intertwined, right?
Yeah.
As we've discovered, it almost intertwines through every episode that we talked about, that mental health has a connection somewhere.
And so I think that allowed us to view the Sustainable Development Goals through the lens of mental health.
Right.
That's interesting. It's interesting. Yeah. Every concept from climate action, overwhelm, community resilience, inclusion, education, mental health plays a part in everything.
Well, even just not understanding it has an impact on your mental health. If you feel like you're not part of the conversations, you're not part of the decision making, you're not taking action because you don't really know where to get involved or what to do, it makes a person feel inadequate, excluded, and unaware of what to do, and maybe even puts you in a place of hopelessness.
Yeah, but hopelessness is a great word for it. So that leads really nicely then into the second question, Heath.
All right.
How has this series changed the way you think about sustainability in our community?
Well, it's very clear to me now that our community is more interconnected and collaborative than I actually imagined. And the boundaries that are crossing between people and organizations for the purpose of problem solving are happening in a big way. And no action is a small action. And that any contribution to any of these initiatives, any of these community organizations, any contribution that anybody has, whatever skill level, whatever physical ability and knowledge, is a contribution. And I think that the people of our community that we've spoken to, they know who each other are. They know what's going on. And all it takes is getting involved and with one of them, with somebody, and asking some questions, and it'll open a world of information for people. That's kind of what I came away from, is like, there's really a great place to get connected.
Yeah.
If you're looking to find ways to help with the same sustainability of our community, and in any community for that matter.
Yeah. I think for me, if I can add to that, Heath, I think sustainability has always been an important topic for me, but on a surface level.
Yeah.
It's always been a buzzword. Surface level, high level, what can we do for sustainability? We want to save the planet. What I've realized through this series is that, and what I've gained even through this series, is a much deeper understanding of sustainability, that it's more than just a buzzword. It's more than just, ensuring our businesses are efficient and financially responsible or taking care of our waste. It includes our social equity. It includes our mental well-being, our community resilience. And it's not just about finding those solutions, but it's more about creating systems that support people, planet, and prosperity into the future. And so what this series has given me, changed the way I think about sustainability, is that it's given me a much deeper understanding.
Right. And I think that's a really great point, because I think no matter where you're at, whether you're not even recycling yet, and this encourages you to actually start recycling or composting or whatever it is, to, you've been doing this and your business is doing all kinds of things that you probably learned something new. But that's the whole thing. It's like, you got to start where you're at and make changes where you're at without being overly concerned about how big this mountain is. You just got to make some sort of changes and some sort of contribution from the place you are. Okay, Sue, what role does storytelling and connection play in driving climate action and sustainable change?
That's a great question. It's a great question. My favorite question, I think. Yeah. Because of this new business I've launched with Chatterbox Creative, it's all about human connection being a catalyst for sustainability. In my opinion, and how I see it, and how I see the community functioning, and supported by all of the collaboration we've seen in Vernon, storytelling and connection are at the heart of sustainability. Because when people can connect with each other, when we have more brains and perspectives contributing to a solution to a problem, that's where we're going to find better answers, more in-depth answers. Storytelling is a key way for us to communicate with each other and have these issues that seem so big and overwhelming actually resonate for us.
Yeah, amazing. Coming from my background in marketing and photography and, video, storytelling is an integral part of almost everything we do, right? And I think I'm just going to read what I had written, because it probably sums up what I'm going to try and say, and I won't say it as well as what I've written. So stories reveal the issues and the pain and bring them to the surface so they can be seen. Stories also give examples of heroes willing to do the work and can inspire others. Lastly, it gives those struggling the hope that they are not alone. And I think that, kind of encompasses the storytelling factor.
Yeah. The story of how I started composting.
Yeah.
This was before the city of Vernon actually provided compost service, curbside pickup for compost. We were actually called Spa Hills Compost and had a bin delivered to our house so that we could start composting. And I remember being so excited about it. I think it was actually at the start of the pandemic, right at the start of COVID. And I was like, what is something I can grasp onto to make me feel a little bit better? Because let's be honest, pandemic started, I felt like my world was ending. I couldn't hug my friends. I couldn't be around people. And I don't know if you know, Heath, I'm an extrovert.
If I didn't know before, I do now.
So I thought to myself, what is one thing I can do that would just fill my bucket a little bit, make me feel a little bit better in the face of this global pandemic? Everybody's on lockdown. I can start composting.
Right.
So we got Spa Hills Compost to deliver a bin to our house.
Yeah. It's those small things that help us actually feel like we're participating, right?
Mm-hmm. Heath, question 4 is, if we could envision our community 10 years from now, what does a truly sustainable future look like?
Yeah,
right?
That's a good question. It's a really big question. My answer was that 10 years from now, I'd like to see our community being a leader in this area of sustainability, where we're sharing and we are an example to other communities, maybe in the Okanagan, across the province, or around the world. wherever our knowledge can reach and the ideas that we've shared as a community can be accessed. I think that after what we've learned from these last 8 episodes, that there's already an incredible amount of things going on in our little city, let alone the whole region. And there's it kind of opened my mind as to what actually has already been accomplished. There's a lot more to do, but we're not at ground zero. We are on the way of making a lot of progress in our community to be more sustainable. And you add all those little movements and those little pieces together, and we're making contribution to the global scale for sure.
Yeah. I think in addition to being a leader in sustainability 10 years from now, I think a truly sustainable future would look like people in our community, outside our community, around the world being open to change, to being open to truly doing the things that make a difference for our planet.
Yeah. Or maybe is it reasonable goal to think that our little area here could be a closed circle community, where
circular economy,
circular economy, where we are generating, using, repurposing, redistributing, and it's I mean, that would be a really cool goal to see if that as a community we could pull that off.
Nothing goes to the landfill.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
okay.
The last question is yours, not mine. I just about asked it, and I realized it's not
mine. No, you can't ask it.
It's your question.
Number 5, last but not least, what's next for us, Sue? And how do we see this series inspiring future conversations or projects?
I think that's a great question to follow what we just talked about, is envisioning our community 10 years from now. What's next for us? I mean...
Netflix.
Netflix. Hey. Number one. I had so much fun. Working with you, Heath.
This has
been great. It's been a really great journey. And so that leads me to number 2, is that I don't think we're done. No, we're not done. We only scratched the surface of so many of these conversations. So then point number 3 is that since we're not done, what is next? We can't officially talk about it quite yet. We will soon. But one thing that we realize that we've hinted towards already in this conversation is that mental health permeates all of these topics.
Yeah.
Everything to do with sustainability, everything to do with climate change, our environment, inequality. Mental health comes up in all of these conversations.
Absolutely.
So perhaps what's next is going a little deeper.
Yes. Yeah. I think we've said this a couple times. We've scratched the surface in this season on a lot of these subjects, and it's time for a deeper dive. Yeah. I want to tell you too, I'm like, this has been a really cool experience for me, and I think I'm really proud of us for being able to take a lot of very serious, heavy subject matter and able to create some fun, light, enjoyable conversation that doesn't leave me, or hopefully not anyone listening, feeling like that it's been too heavy. I feel like we've shed a lot of light on a lot of things, and I hope that people go away from this, like I have, feeling a lot more enlightened and a lot more hopeful for what we can do collectively.
And hopefully inspired a little bit.
Yeah.
Even if nothing else, if you listen to no other segment of our episodes, go back and listen to the community action sections. What can you do?
Yeah.
Because there's so many things, and it all comes back to education. It comes back to asking questions. It comes back to figuring out what you're really passionate about and just doing one small thing. Something. Anything.
And to continue with what's next is we'd love to hear what you think is next. And if you have any ideas or any suggestions or anything.
So reach out to us. Let us know what we missed.
Or just tell us how awesome it was. We'd love to hear that too.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate everybody for listening, watching, learning, and we hope you'll be hearing from us again soon.
Backyards to Boardrooms, Season 1. And out. Thanks for listening to Backyards to Boardrooms.
Don't forget to subscribe, and all the links to the cool things you learned are down in the notes below.
Bye.
Bye.